What if I told you that baking sugar cookie cutouts could actually rewire the way you think? Imagine pressing a heart-shaped cutter into soft dough, and in that simple act, watching your mind stretch and bend to fit something new. You might laugh and say, "It's just cookies," but stick around because today we're proving that every crack in the dough, every stubborn edge, is really a moment of learning. Forget dry lectures and dusty textbooks. We're about to turn your kitchen into a neuroscience lab, one where flour, sugar, and butter become the ultimate teaching tools. You'll see how squeezing dough into an old shape is exactly like trying to force new ideas into your existing mental molds, and how adjusting that cutter or chilling the dough is just like reshaping your brain's own schemas. By the end of this video, you won't just have a tray of perfectly formed cookies. You'll have had your very own aha moment, the same spark a child experiences when they realize a penguin is still a bird, even if it can't fly. Ready to taste a breakthrough? Let's bake and learn together. Hey there, cognitive chefs. I'm Alex, and welcome to Cognitive Kitchen, where we believe that the best way to grasp big psychological ideas is by getting your hands a little messy in the kitchen. You've probably heard of JeanPiaget and his groundbreaking work on how we learn. But let's be honest, those theories can feel a bit abstract when you're staring at a textbook. That's where we come in. Here's our bold claim. You can understand how your mind grows and adapts by baking something as simple and as delightful as sugar cookie cutouts. Today we're tackling one of Piaget's cornerstone concepts, assimilation versus accommodation. Those fancy words basically describe how we fit new information into our existing mental molds, or change those molds when old ones just don't work. Think of it as your brain's version of a cookie cutter. Sometimes the dough slips right in, and sometimes it cracks, forcing you to rethink your approach. Our mission at Cognitive Kitchen is to turn aha moments into actual edible treats. You'll leave with a tray of perfect cookies and a crystal clear understanding of how learning really happens, whether you're 2 years old or 22. So, preheat that oven, gather your ingredients, and get ready to see your dough and your mind shift shape in ways you never expected. Let's cook up some knowledge. Jean Piaget wasn't satisfied with simply observing children's behavior. He wanted to understand how their minds actually changed as they encountered the world. He discovered that learning isn't a passive soak-in of facts, nor is it pure trial and error. Instead, it's a dynamic dance between what we already know and what we're trying to grasp for the first time. At the heart of that dance lie two remarkably simple yet powerful processes: assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is what happens when we take something new and force it into an existing mental mold, what Piaget called a schema. Imagine a child who knows the word dog and pictures a small furry animal with 4 legs and a wagging tail. When they see a new breed, say a Dalmatian, they'll happily call it a dog, fitting the spotted newcomer into their pre-existing dog schema without changing that schema at all. That's assimilation. The newcomer doesn't alter what you believe. It just squeezes into the space you've already carved out. Accommodation, on the other hand, kicks in when that existing mold just won't do. Picture that same toddler confronted with a penguin. No amount of tail wagging or barking is going to happen here. The penguin stands, waddles, and swims, but it doesn't fly, and it doesn't look at all like the family dog, or the family bird for that matter. The child reaches a breaking point. To make sense of this odd creature, they must change their mental frameworks. They expand or reshape the bird schema to include flightless marvels, or perhaps even create a whole new category. That reshaping is accommodation, altering your mental map to make room for new territory. Why does this matter? Because every time you learn, you're balancing these two forces. You're constantly deciding, often without realizing it, whether new information can be forced to fit what you already know, or whether it demands that you revise your understanding entirely. And this tug-of-war is not confined to preschoolers. It underpins how scientists revise theories, how readers interpret metaphor, and how each of us navigates the unexpected twists of daily life. Yet understanding these invisible processes can feel frustratingly abstract. How do you see the mind reshaping itself? How can you feel the moment when assimilation gives way to accommodation? Textbooks describe schemas and mental maps in neat paragraphs, but our brains don't come with an instruction manual. We need something we can touch, something we can watch bend and then break and bend again. That's why we're here with our rolling pin and cookie cutters. In just a few minutes, you'll witness dough take on new forms, crack under pressure, and ultimately find a better fit. You'll feel the difference between forcing a shape and reshaping the cutter itself, just as your mind does every time it meets the unknown. By the end of this journey from flour to perfect cutout, you'll see assimilation and accommodation not as dry jargon, but as the very ingredients of how you and every child learn to make sense of the world. You might be wondering, why? Sugar cookie cutouts of all things. What makes this humble treat the perfect mirror for assimilation and accommodation? It all comes down to the interplay between dough and cutter, between form and flexibility. When you press a cutter into soft dough, you're asking the dough to conform to a pre-designed shape. If the dough is well prepared, pliable, evenly rolled, it will slip neatly into the cutter's silhouette. That's pure assimilation, new material forced into an existing mold without changing the mold itself. But when the dough is too warm, too cold, or rolled unevenly, it resists. The edges crumble, the shape warps, and suddenly you face a choice. Keep forcing it and end up with a ragged star or heart, or adjust your approach. Chill the dough, dust the cutter, roll more evenly. That adjustment is accommodation. You change your technique or even your cutter's angle to achieve that crisp outline. Throughout today's bake, every crack and every smooth release will stand for a mental aha moment. Each time you tweak your process, you're not just refining a recipe, you're witnessing the same push and pull your mind experiences when it encounters new information. The cutter is your existing schema, the dough is fresh data. And by the time your tray is filled with perfect shapes, you'll understand on a visceral level how learning really works. Sometimes we fit new ideas into old frameworks, and sometimes we reshape those frameworks to fit the ideas. So grab your rolling pin and cutters, because this isn't just about cookies. It's about feeling the very essence of how we learn, one delicious bite at a time. First, let's get everything ready. You'll need 200 grams of softened butter, 150 grams of sugar, 1 large egg, a teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 350 grams of all-purpose flour. Flour your work surface lightly and set out your rolling pin and cookie cutters. Cream the butter and sugar together in a large bowl. As you beat, notice how the grainy sugar crystals gradually disappear into the butter, rendering it smooth and pale. That transformation is your first taste of assimilation. You're folding sugar into your buttery schema until it bends to your will. Crack in the egg and pour in the vanilla. At first, the mixture looks like it might separate, yellow streaks darting through white. But as you whisk, the new liquid integrates, forming a cohesive batter. That moment, when separate elements become one unified whole, echoes how new information can merge seamlessly into existing mental structures. Now comes the flour. Dump half of it into the bowl and stir gently. The dough begins to thicken, still pliable. Add the rest of the flour and watch it firm up. If you stir too vigorously, the dough might clump or resist, like information that doesn't quite fit. An old belief: if it feels dry, add a teaspoon of milk. That tiny tweak is accommodation. You're changing your approach to achieve the right consistency. Turn the dough onto your floured surface. Press it into a disc and sprinkle a little flour. On top, roll it out evenly to about 1/2 centimeter thickness. Here you might notice uneven patches, thin in some places, thick in others. If you press too hard, the thin parts tear, too soft, and the thick parts stay doughy. Adjust your pressure and angle, just as you'd adjust a mental schema when it doesn't fit new data. Choose your cutter, a star, a heart, a circle, and press straight down. If the dough is perfect, the shape releases cleanly. If it sticks or cracks, pause. Dust the cutter with flour or chill the dough for a minute. You're accommodating, recognizing that your first strategy didn't work, and adapting to achieve that crisp outline. As you lift the cutter, admire how the dough yielded or resisted and what you did to succeed. Line the shapes on a tray, spacing them just right. Slide them into the preheated oven and set the timer for 8 minutes. While you wait, reflect on how many tiny decisions you made: to add milk, to dust with flour, to change your rolling pressure. Each one was a mini accommodation, a deliberate reshaping of method to fit the task. When the edges turn a light golden brown, pull the tray out. The cookies have firmed into their final forms, solid evidence of every assimilation and accommodation you performed. Let them cool, then transfer to a plate. As you bite into that first cookie, taste not just sugar and butter, but the sweet satisfaction of understanding how learning really happens, through a constant interplay of fitting new experiences into old frameworks and reshaping those frameworks when needed. The moment you've been waiting for arrives when the dough is rolled just so, and the cutter hovers above it like a question mark. You press down firmly, and the dough resists. A jagged edge appears where you expected a perfect star. You pull the cutter away, and there, clinging to its rim, are fragments of dough that didn't make the leap. You might be tempted to jam the cutter back in, forcing the pieces to conform. After all, you've done everything the same way up to now, but if you push harder, you'll tear the shape and end up with a ruined cookie. Instead, you pause. You lift the dough, brush away the loose bits, and consider your next move. That hesitation, that moment of recognition, this is assimilation bumping against reality. Your existing cutter schema cannot contain this patch of dough without breaking, so you accommodate. You dust the cutter with flour, giving the dough less to cling to. You adjust the angle of your press, tilting ever so slightly so the edges release more cleanly. You might even decide to chill the dough for 30 seconds so it firms up. Each tweak is a conscious adaptation of your method, your schema, so that the cutter and dough can finally cooperate. Press again. This time the star emerges whole, edges crisp and precise. You lift the cutter and reveal a perfect shape. That satisfying pop as the dough releases is your aha moment. In that instant, you feel what Piaget described: the transition from forcing new information into an old mold to reshaping the mold itself so it truly fits. Imagine a child learning that a whale is not a fish. At first, they might call it a fish, because it lives in the water and has fins, assimilation. But when they learn that whales breathe air, nurse their young, and are mammals, the fish schema shatters. To understand whaleness, they must accommodate by creating a new category. That mental shift can feel as momentous as watching your dough crack, unless you see it in action. Here, you saw it in action. Take another cutter, maybe a heart this. Time and try again. Perhaps this dough responds differently. Maybe the edges release perfectly on the first press, or maybe you need another small tweak. Each shape you cut, each crack you correct, is a miniature lesson in how minds grow. You're not just making cookies, you're embodying the very mechanics of learning. Look at your tray now. A collection of stars, hearts, circles, each one the product of assimilation attempts and accommodation successes. Some shapes came easily, slipping out like ideas that fit neatly into what we already know. Others took patience and adjustment, like concepts that force us to rethink our assumptions. Together, they form a gallery of your cognitive journey. As the oven timer ticks down, consider how often you encounter mental rough patches in daily life. You meet a new coworker whose style doesn't match your expectation of professionalism. You read an article that challenges your political beliefs. You watch a movie in a genre you thought you disliked. In each case, you first try to force these experiences into familiar schemas. When that fails, you face a choice. Reject the new, input or accommodate, reshape your understanding. When you finally taste your cookie, a crisp edge giving way to a tender interior, you taste more than sugar and butter. You taste the payoff of accommodation, the reward of adapting your approach. You feel the delight of an idea clicking into place, of a mental mold reshaped to welcome something new. That sweet crunch is proof that learning is active, messy, and utterly delicious. Piaget's brilliance was in noticing these shifts in children's thinking. Our brilliance today is in making them visible and edible. Every crack you coaxed into perfection, every shape you coaxed from stubborn dough, stands for a moment your mind refused to be confined by old patterns. You didn't just watch learning happen, you baked it. So the next time you bite into a cookie, remember, Beneath that sugary surface lies the story of your own cognitive transformation. You are both chef and scientist, mixing ingredients and ideas, cutting shapes and cutting new pathways in your brain. Assimilation got you started. Accommodation brought you home. And those cookies, they're the sweetest evidence of your evolving mind. The timer dings and you slide the tray onto the counter, the hot air shimmering above those perfectly cut shapes. The edges are just turning golden, the centers still tender. Proof that you struck the right balance between pressure and patience, between forcing a shape and reshaping your approach. You let the cookies rest for a minute, then transfer them carefully onto a cooling rack. As they settle, take a moment to think about everything you just did. Each decision, dusting the cutter, adjusting your rolling pressure, chilling the dough, was an act of accommodation. You noticed the dough resisting your initial plan, and you changed your method so the shapes would come out just right. Those final cookies are the result of dozens of tiny mental tweaks. While the cookies cool, consider another example of accommodation in everyday life. Imagine you've always thought of weekends as time to sleep in and relax. Then you become a parent. Suddenly weekend means early wake-ups, soccer games, and snack prep. Your old weekend schema cracks under pressure. You accommodate. By reshaping your expectations, you find joy in tiny moments of laughter rather than a lazy morning in bed. Back in the kitchen, the cookies are firm now. You lift a star-shaped treat, admire its crisp edge, and inhale that warm vanilla aroma. Each cookie on the rack is more than a sweet reward. It's a milestone in your learning journey. You forced, you paused, you adapted, and you were rewarded with perfection. You plate a handful of shapes, stars, hearts, circles, lining them up like trophies. Notice how some shapes came easily, slipping out in one smooth motion, while others needed that extra tweak. Both experiences matter. The easy fits remind you that assimilation is quick and satisfying when new information aligns with what you already know. The tougher fits remind you that accommodation, though it takes effort, leads to growth and deeper understanding. As you take that first bite, the contrast of crisp edge and soft center mirrors the contrast between old schemas and new insights. You taste not just sugar and butter, but the sweet payoff of a mind willing to adjust. Learning isn't about forcing every experience into what you already believe. It's about recognizing when your mental molds need reshaping. Your kitchen experiment is complete, but the lesson lives on. Every time you encounter something that doesn't fit, an unfamiliar idea, a surprising fact, you have a choice. Push, harder, or adapt. Choose to adapt. That's where the real magic happens, whether you're baking cookies or expanding your mind. Look at that plate of stars, hearts, and circles, each one a little monument to your own mental flexibility. These cookies aren't just sugar and butter. They're proof that learning happens in the spaces between forcing and adapting. When you first pressed the cutter and the dough cracked, you experienced assimilation hitting its limit. When you paused, dusted the cutter, and tried again, you practiced accommodation. The result? A perfect shape and a perfect understanding of how our minds grow. Think back to the first cookie you cut. It wobbled, edges jagged, and you almost pushed harder to make it work. But you didn't. You paused, you adjusted, and you succeeded. That pause, the moment you recognized my old way isn't enough, is exactly what children experience when they shift from calling every four-legged animal a dog to understanding that some are cats, cows, or horses. It's the spark of insight that comes when we let go of forcing and embrace reshaping. These cookies cool now, but the lesson stays warm. Every time you learn something new, a tricky math concept, a cultural custom, a surprising fact about yourself, you're doing this same dance. You try to fit the new into the old. If it doesn't fit, you adapt. You change your mental cutter. That willingness to adjust is what turns confusion into clarity. So here's your sweet takeaway. Growth isn't about stubbornly sticking to what you know. It's about noticing when your approach falters and having the courage to shift course. It's the difference between a broken cookie and a flawless one. Next time you bite into one of these treats, remember the cracks and the tweaks, the small victories of accommodation. Let that crunchy edge and tender center remind you that real learning is active, sometimes messy, but always delicious when you embrace change. What other mental molds are you ready to reshape? And just like that, our batch of sugar cookie cutouts is gone, but the lesson we baked into every bite lasts far longer. You've seen how pressing dough into a rigid shape mirrors the way we try to force new ideas into old mental molds, and how pausing to adjust your technique mirrors the courage it takes to reshape those molds when they no longer serve us. From the first jagged edge to the final perfect star, you lived through assimilation and accommodation in real time. And now you know why Piaget's theory isn't just academic jargon, but a recipe for understanding every twist and turn our minds take as we learn. If today's experiment taught you anything, let it be this. Every time you encounter something unfamiliar, whether it's a new baking trick, a complex theory, or a different point of view, you have a choice. You can push harder, trying to cram that experience into your existing framework, or you can step back, dust off your mental cutter, and reshape your approach. The latter is where growth happens. It's where you turn jagged edges into polished insights, confusion into clarity, and ordinary moments into aha breakthroughs. Thank you for joining me in Cognitive Kitchen. If you felt that spark of discovery as you watched your dough and your mind shift shape, give this video a thumbs up. Share your own stories in the comments. When was the last time you had to reshape your mental mold to fit something new? Your experience might be the inspiration someone else needs to embrace accommodation in their own life. If you're hungry for more Psychology Meets Kitchen adventures, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Next week, we'll explore Piaget's conservation of volume with a wild water jelly experiment that will change the way you think about liquids and maybe even about the world. Until then, keep experimenting, keep adjusting, and remember, the best learning is the kind you can taste. Cognitive Kitchen, where every recipe is a lesson and every lesson is delicious.